A few weeks back, Daddy and Dada had to break the bad news.
Smilingfriends will be ending after season 3 is done.
For a lot of people in the fandom, this was just devastating and disappointing. For me, though, well, I was elated. These two funny little creatures found a way to cheat death. I think they cooked up a litmus test to gauge the health of their fandom, didn't like the result, and then made the call to leap from the zenith rather than to crawl out from the nadir. Obviously, I think the biggest reason that they stopped was probably burnout, both from the stress of making the show itself and from dealing with the fandom.
Featuring Mark M as the boss.
Because even if they really do love their fans, and there's no reason to think they don't, even if their every interaction seems like they're just being their authentic selves.
What does everyone think about Red Dye 40? Our poor what does RFK got to say about Red Dye 40?
Autism destroys families.
All of this ultimately is still two people playing characters on a stage. They are still brand representatives. They can't be mean or crass or dismissive or overly political because if someone recorded it, it might be bad press. Their ability to put on entertaining, amusing personas is kind of core as such to ensure that their staff gets paid, and in addition to their staff, they can compensate their guest cameos too.
We were going to get Chris Chan.
Be safe and go forth with that which is good, and lifetime blessings every one of you.
Enjoyable as it might be to bask in the adoration of your audience, sometimes it's also nice to just be able to disappear for a weekend and play some Worms Armageddon with the boys.
Are we gonna blow up pieces of Chris Chan?
Yeah.
Even so, even if that's the main thing, I think that the Schmaloogies episode was something of a litmus test that they had set up. Now, I've never claimed to be a perfect person or even a good person, so I can freely admit to having done long-form improv comedy in my past, and that's exactly what this episode is. Goofy creatures, a guy who finds it all entirely too silly, an evil wizard who kills because it believes that he will cure his hair loss, and all that leads to a so relatable conversation about conventional hair loss treatments. You've got a callback joke to taking a trip to Wawa, which leads to an awkward conversation, and whoa, hey, I've been in awkward conversations before. Long-form improv is all about converting the absurd into the mundane.
Well, call that one Frank.
Sort of like the idea of taking a cartoon character in for a medical checkup. This show has made use of improv and ad-libbed content before plenty of times, but I feel like it's a lot more prominent in Schmaloogies. It's not a bad episode per se, but it just feels less curated and less punchy than other offerings in the series. Reddit loved it, though, and I guess maybe that's because it hits close to home.
By bringing up the viral Hassan dog shock collar controversy.
And I think that is the signal they got back, that their fan base has a whole lot of Rick and Morty fans in it, so maybe it's time to pull the plug. Now, what's wrong with having those people in your audience? Besides the obvious, I mean. Well, the problem isn't even specifically Rick and Morty fans, but rather what they represent. Mops.
Guys, I know this might sound a little bit fucked up to say, but
one of the funniest things you could do is sew your girlfriend's hands together. When she wakes up, her hands are stuck together.
This is one of my favorite think pieces ever written, which perfectly captures the decay of subcultures. It's a bit dated and a bit pretentious, but it really does make it all make sense. Why did JoJo's Bizarre Adventure transform from a niche sub-community of ardent enthusiasts into one of the most annoying and unfunny groups of people on the planet? Why are so many communities infested with groomers, and yet no one ever seems to care? Why have so many people who love Lovecraft somehow not read a single paragraph that he's written? Why does it feel like every time you find something good and relatively unknown, you just know that one day it's going to be despoiled? The way that this article breaks down the process of subculture decay is great. So, the first step is that creatives make a new thing and the fanatics are drawn to it. Collectively, these two groups are known as the geeks, and when they meet, a scene is formed. Fans contribute to the scene with fan art, cosplay, volunteering, donations, advertising. Ultimately, the two groups energize and galvanize one another. This is Eden. This is great. This is the time that you want to be in the scene. If the new thing is a bit esoteric or it really only has limited appeal, that's kind of where this all ends and it sort of exists as its own thing, off in space. But if the new thing is exciting and easy to get into, that's when the mops start to come in. They're sort of like fanatics with a few important differences, so they don't actually contribute to the scene, and they don't actually like the new thing. They just like the scene because they see it as popular, and well, if it gets bigger, they can say that they were into it before it was cool. In a word, mops are normies. And a certain number of normies in a scene is a good thing. They moderate the worst excesses of the fanatics, they do still provide some financial security, and of course they tell their friends. Mops and fans don't exactly get along, but they do tolerate one another. Even so, though, there is an inflection point. Once mops outnumber the geeks, they start dragging the scene towards their preferences. Be less like the new thing, be more like this popular thing, and what you're doing is great, but let's maybe see less of that and more of what these other guys are doing. And when that happens, when the mops outnumber the geeks, that's when the sociopaths enter. This group's pretty straightforward. They see gain for themselves, whether it's financial, sexual, social, whatever, and they take it. They monetize the scene, making it corporate. They create power structures for themselves to sit atop, and they encourage idol worship. They encourage and enfranchise increasingly weird, increasingly erotic content in the scene. And they just keep at it until all the juice of the scene, all the opportunity has been sucked dry. Once sociopaths are latched, they can't be detached. They are masters of social engineering, and they understand how easily manipulated empathetic people are. Just let people enjoy things is their mantra, because it shuts down any attempt to call attention to what they're doing. The mops never actually cared about the new thing anyways, and well, they don't want to be bad people, right? So they rally to the sociopath's defense, and then they develop their own mantra: gatekeeping is wrong. Then the mops kick out as many of the geeks from the scene as they possibly can and lock the gate right behind them, and the geeks that don't get kicked out, the ones trapped inside, they get stuck producing slop for the rest of eternity. There's more to the article, more that it breaks down, and I really think it's worth a read. It's pretty quick, but that is the gist. The fate of every fandom and every subculture is to be flooded by people who don't really value it, and then for those people to be hoarded out by people who don't really value anything. I think all of that was maybe a little bit abstract, and so to briefly restate my point, conceptualize all this within the metaphor of gentrification. What usually happens with gentrification is that creative people who don't come from well-off families move into neighborhoods with low property values because they're going to have lower rents. These vanguard creatives usually interact with and contribute to the local community, and so the scene that then develops might be a music venue, an art studio, chains of restaurants, whatever it is, it's something magnetic that attracts fanatics. As soon as this starts to happen, you're going to notice that one or two shrewd property developers start poking around the neighborhood. They'll buy maybe a housing project or a few buildings, and then they'll knock them over and turn them into luxury apartments. These actually tend to be huge losses for these companies at first, because entire floors of the new units are usually designated as Section 8 or affordable housing, and they do that to get permission from the city in order to build. The rest of the units in the building often sit idle, usually for years and years and years and years. So why would they do that? Well, their wager is that the scene is going to grow. Now, it's true that fanatics who really want to be a part of the scene, they're going to turn their nose up at these luxury apartments. They're going to go, why would anyone ever buy one of those? And they're just going to try to rent from local landlords. But once mops start to take interest, once normies have their eyes on it, that's the problem. Mops don't actually like the scene or its aesthetic. They just want to live where it's cool and chic. They want to live in gaudy, ugly, luxury apartments that stand out from the surrounding architecture, because it signifies how ahead of the curve and cool they are. Sooner or later, one mop is going to move into one of those empty luxury apartments, and that's when others start to follow. Now, all mops say that they don't like gentrification because this is an important platitude to repeat for the sake of your social credit score. The inflection point is the moment at which these mops start making excuses for themselves. Oh, you see, well, they dislike gentrification altogether, but this isn't gentrification, or maybe it is, but surely moving into an apartment that's already been built is really not that big of a deal. I mean, nobody was there anyways. When that kind of stuff starts happening, that's the moment at which property developers, private equity, and the rest of the usual suspects all know that it's time to go into a feeding frenzy. All those businesses and luxury apartments cropping up start to drive up property prices. Before long, every single part of the original scene, the neighborhood, the creatives, and the fanatics, have all been driven out of the area, replaced by people who all agree that the neighborhood hasn't been gentrified, the scene hasn't gone anywhere, and anyways, if either of those did actually happen, then, well, they themselves had nothing to do with it. See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, and post online about how inclusive and morally superior of a person you are.
Maybe we're wrong about her, you guys. Nobody evil would do that.
What is this thing? Throw this away.
I can't, man. It's not mine. I'm just holding onto it for my uncle until he gets out of the hospital.
I was innocent. There never, ever, 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 ever was any sense between Barbara and I, period.
Ew.
In this metaphor, the Smilingfriends are a restaurant around which a whole local scene and culture has developed. Schmaloogies is an item they've added to their menu which is decidedly different from their other offerings, which has been intentionally designed to appeal to a palate more in tune with the bohemian bourgeois chic restaurant that has opened across the street from them. And it turns out to be one of their most popular items, certainly more popular than anything they served in their first 2 years of business. And so the owners make the call to close the business down because they know the moment has passed. They can't just relocate to another part of town because the scene was this part of town, was this community, was this moment in time. Trying to carry on or trying to resuscitate it elsewhere would both doom it to decline. And so by making the call to walk away from Smilingfriends when it was seemingly at its zenith, Zach and Mike have avoided that slow and inevitable decay. The show and its fandom will to an extent be forever frozen in time at this high watermark. And it serves as a kind of proof positive that integrity really can win out over greed, even in this modern day of endless and cynical exploitation of art for the benefit of lifelong culture vultures. And I think that's something just worth smiling about. If you made it this far in the video, there's like a 50-50 chance that you might be the sort of person to appreciate a good Oni Plays animated, so check out this one made by a friend of mine, even if I imagine that this video is not going to have anywhere near the number of views as his animation is going to. I mean, that would be the case anyways in a just world, which admittedly is not the one that we live in.
Guys, I did it! I didn't get sick from a salad lamb.
You were supposed to condemn him.
What?
You just emboldened a war criminal dictator.
Dude, I don't know anything about politics, and even I know he's bad. He wiped a whole fucking race of people off the face of the planet.